Okay, so when you open the project, it always does this. It's on an empty blank scene, so we got to go find the scene that I made. It should be in the scenes folder. And just double click that to open it, and we get this nice background I found from freebackgrounds.com or something like that. It gave me like 500 backgrounds. I just picked one. Anyway, so if we look at this project a little bit, we can see we have a sprite. If we played it, we don't have to because you can't do anything because there's no input, which is what we'll be adding. So the very first thing we have to do is make that input actions asset that I talked about. That's the most important thing to making input. If you're making a new Unity project from scratch, it will have one included for you. For the sake of this workshop, we are going to be making one ourselves. Very easy. Right-click on the assets. We're going to create, and then down at the very bottom, there's an input actions asset. Make that, call it something like player actions or action map, or whatever you want to call it. Player actions is good. And then, if we double-click that, we will get that window that I was talking about. You can see how everything is broken up into the different columns I mentioned. And this is what we'll be editing for most of the workshop. Again, it's very straightforward to add stuff. You will see as soon as we start that it all kind of makes sense. You just have to know where to click. So the first thing we're going to do is make a new control scheme. We're going to start by using the keyboard. So we're going to want to make a control scheme for the keyboard. Up in the top right, there's a tiny little button at the top. It says no control scheme because we have no control scheme. But if we click it, we can see that it asks us if we want to make a new control scheme, which we do. So we're going to add one. Then I'll bring up another window where we can name it. You can just call it keyboard because we're using a keyboard. If you were making one for a controller, you would name it what the controller is, but this is just keyboard. And then we're going to add a device type. So we are using the keyboard, so when we click that, we're going to click keyboard. This makes sense. Very straightforward, as you can see. And then that's all we have to do for control scheme. So we save that, and it'll appear at the top, and it'll be like, we have keyboard control scheme. There's a button on the right side for saving. The stuff will not appear as it's supposed to if you do not save. You can also click autosave if you want it to save after every change. Sometimes it flickers when it's saving. I find it annoying, so preference if you want to autosave or not. Very important to save. So first thing we're going to do now is make an action map. So action map, again, is the set of controls you want to use. So if you're walking, you have a certain set. If you're controlling a vehicle, you have a certain set. If you're in a menu, you would have a different set. It's essentially a way to break up the same control into a different activity. So if in a menu, you move the left stick to change the menu spot. If you're running or walking, you use the left stick to walk. So that's what action maps are. So we're going to make one for just walking or moving. So click the plus, name it whatever you want. I like move because you're moving. I love naming variables. So and it will give us in the actions panel in the middle. It'll give us a new action. We don't actually want that because we're demonstrating stuff here. So we're going to right-click that to delete it. But once you know what you're doing, you can modify it however you want. To make a new action, which these are the controls we're using. So we're going to make a WASD movement one first. So we're going to click the plus on the right side there. And it'll make a new action. That's exactly what we have. You're going to call it, let's call it movement, just because that's what it is. And so inside that action, if we open it, we'll see a binding. So we could make the WASD ourselves by adding more of these bindings. But Unity, because Unity is used to make games, already has a way of collecting 4 inputs. And we can see that if we go to the left side again where the plus is, but this time we have move selected. I think it's that, the plus under the...
Oh, this one.
It should be that one, I think. We'll see if I remember right.
Oh yeah. Nope.
Yeah, okay, so this is how you would add more bindings. And again, I said we want to make 4 of them. So we could add 4 here, but Unity has a certain one. I forgot you have to change the mode. So on the action properties panel, that's probably what we're doing. There's an action type. So we're going to change that from button, which is a single button, to a value. And then change the control type to vector2. Because movement is usually, traditionally, vector2 with X and Y for your up and down, left, right, just for 2D games. And now, if we go back to that plus, I was getting a little ahead of myself, we can see it'll have an up, down, left, right composite. And that's what we want. That will add all of the things we want. You can see if we click that, it makes a 2D vector for us with our up, down, left, right stuff all there. So you can rename that 2D vector if you want. You can call it walk. You don't have to. Naming is optional, of course. And now we're going to bind our controls. So if you click the up action there, on the left side you can see its properties. So we're going to want to change its path. The path is which button you're assigning it to, or which action you want to assign it to. You can search for it with the search bar, or you can listen. If you click listen and then press the key you want, it will automatically find which button you want. For up, you're going to want W, down S. Or you could bind it to literally whatever you want. You can make it the space bar, enter key, whatever you want. But we're going to do just the traditional WSD movement. Very straightforward, very easy. Another thing. Back on, if you select your up, down, left, right actions, you'll see on the right side there's a use in control scheme. So if you're having multiple ways of controlling your game, say you have a controller as well, you're going to want to check which control scheme this control belongs to. So these are all keyboard inputs, so we're going to go through each of them and select keyboard, just so the system knows when I'm in keyboard mode, these are what these keys do. If you have different controllers, I don't know how much it matters, because it wouldn't read a left stick as a keyboard input, but it's better to be safe when making stuff. You don't want to have issues later on. Okay, I believe that's everything we need to set stuff up. So we're going to save the asset now and go back into the regular Unity editor. So we've made our inputs, but we have to tell the player how to access them. Because right now, our player doesn't have any reference to those actions we just made. They're just kind of sitting there. Oh, and if you see the little warning on the side, that just means there is no project-wide asset established. That's just a little Unity thing. You can ignore it, or you can click the assign project-wide asset. For the demonstration, it doesn't change anything. It's just if you have multiple control maps or control actions, there's so many different words, I get confused. But yeah, so in our game scene, now we're going to select player, and we're going to drag our input actions thing we just made onto the player actions component. I think it's at the bottom. That's cool how it does that. But yeah, the player input component is what reads our controls. So we drag that into the action spot. Now it will have a reference to our controls that we just made. You can see there's a couple more options here. We have default scheme, auto switch, default map. Those are just saying, obviously, the default ones are saying what should it default to. The auto switch lets it automatically switch input schemes, control schemes, when a new form of input is detected. So if you're playing on your keyboard and suddenly you plug in a controller and you want to continue playing on that, the system can do that. It's kind of nice. It's pretty cool, actually. When you set it all up, you're like, oh, that was so easy. If you've used the old Unity input system where you need all the if statements and string paths, it's such a pain to add new controller inputs. This is so much nicer. Yay. Okay, so you can set your default schemes if you want. You don't have to. It'll detect them for you. The other important thing we're going to need to do is set up our actual functions or methods to run when our controls are detected. So we will require writing a little bit of code. Hope everyone's okay with that. You're in game dev, I think you have to be. But there's one important thing we need to do before we start writing code, and that's set up our events. So right now, under behavior, under player input, you can see it says send messages. There's a bunch of different ways to interact with the input system. You can do it all in the code. You can do it like we did with the user interface. I find using these Unity events is the easiest, so that's what we're going to go with. All you have to do is click on the send messages and change it to use Unity events or invoke Unity events. And that'll give us that list of events that we need. So a little drop down on the events. If we click that, we should see all of our controls that we just made. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. Sometimes it doesn't save. So if you go back into your player actions and you save, it might appear. You might have to re-add some things. It was a little strange. You can see anything. There it goes. So now we have our move drop down. So that's our action map that we made for all of our movement controls. And you can see we have our move callback context. So if you've ever set up a button in Unity where you send the event for what you want the button to do, it's exactly the same as this. So if we click that plus, we can select an object and choose which event we want. But we have no events right now. So we're going to have to make some. So in, I believe what I call it, Player Input Manager, is that the script? Yeah. So Player Input Manager is a script that I made. That's where we're going to be adding our stuff. It requires, if you do this yourself, the input, it needs a reference to the input actions, player movement. Oh, player movement's the script I made to handle player movement. So you don't have to write any of the movement code. We're just writing the getting the inputs part. But this is what I meant. It needs a reference to using Unity Engine input system, because there's a very specific keyword we need to actually tell the method that we want the input system to run this. A little bit of code time. Hope everyone's ready. We're going to make a method called walk. It's going to be a public void walk, and in parentheses, I like the code typing. It's going to input actions dot callback context, I believe. I'm really hoping my memory is serving me right. Yeah, perfect. Sometimes it fills it in. I love that. So easy. Perfect. So, what is the context? The context is passed in by our input system, and it tells us everything we want about what input was just detected. So this is the method that will hook up to our input system. But we actually want to get some input. And the way we're going to do that is using that context, and we're going to read a value in. So let's make a float for our X movement. We can call it. Oh look, Ryder's doing it for us. So we're going to want exactly that. We're getting our horizontal movement from the context. It is context.readValue, and then in those angle brackets, we're going to call the type we want. Float might work. You can also do vector2 because it's of type vector2, and then get .x. We might have issues with that. I've never seen that before. But that is getting our horizontal movement from our inputs we made. Very straightforward. Now we're going to want to pass those that data into our player actions, or player movement. Sorry, so many different names. We can get confused. And I actually forgot what the method is, so we're going to type out player movement dot, and we're going to see what pops up to make the player move. Let's see. We're looking for something moving related. that sounds right. Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah, and that should take in our value. Perfect. So that will handle all of the movement stuff. I did all the programming for that for you, so you can only focus on the input. So now all we have to do is hook that up to our Unity event. So if we go back to the player and back to the player input, all the way down to the events, and find the event and then click on it and drag it in. Very straightforward. I feel like I'm adding more steps to kind of make myself sound like a good presenter, but it's very easy, I promise. Yeah, and it's nice because it detects that we're calling the input actions context, so it'll put that method at the top for you. So you don't have to search through it. And fingers crossed, that should be our movement all done. We should be getting input, and if we play and we press our keys that we assigned to left, right. Oh no.
So maybe it does have to be vector
Okay,
2.
yeah, so I guess rider isn't always right. Don't trust AI, kids. Change the float to vector 2 because our binding is a vector 2, our up, down, left, right, and then we're going to have to do a .x to just get the x component of that vector 2. After the parentheses.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that darn AI is rotting our brains or whatever. So that's the change. It gives you a very weird input errors. I don't think I've seen those before. Very helpful. Invalid operation exception. Okay. Cool. But now if you run it again, we should see if everything works. Every time I run code, I'm praying that it does what I want it to do. Oh, and we can see the beautiful animations. You got what? We can go back and help at the end. This isn't going to take very long. So now we're going to add jump. And we're basically going to go through the exact same process, except we need one more step. I'll explain that when we get there. But back in our player actions, there's a binding we haven't binded yet. That's fun. So we're going to make that our jump. So it should let us rename that. Maybe not? Maybe we have to just make a new one entirely. Okay, never mind. Go back to the plus on the top under actions. And we're going to make a new binding. Call it jump. And you have to drop down. So we made the title. We want the binding actually. So we're going to make that the spacebar. Or again, whatever you want to be able to jump. Make sure you check that it's in the keyboard control scheme so that it can recognize it. And that's our input added. Very straightforward. Make sure you save the asset before you close it. And then if we go back to our player actions on our player component, player input, so sorry. Under the event, we should see there's a new event now called jump. And we're going to bind that to the method we're about to write. So if we go back to our code, we can start writing that method. It's going to be the same parameters as before. Public void, but this time jump, input action, call that context. Same exact stuff to recognize the method. Okay, so here's the change we're going to have to make. This method will actually run 3 times during the input. So whatever action it is, if it's a button press, if it's getting a controller stick, whatever it is, it's going to run 3 times. It's going to run when it starts, which is when it starts to process. It's going to run when it's performed, which is when it finishes any interactions or restrictions you might have on it, which I'll explain later, and it's going to run once when it ends. So for a button press, that would look like you press it, it would run the start and performed, you release it, it would run the end. When we jump, we want it only to jump once. If we just put our jump in there, it'll jump 3 times because it's running 3 times. So we only want to run when it starts. And luckily, we have a very easy way to detect that using our callback context. Very nice. So if we say if context.started, so you can see the letters filling it in there, we want to run when it starts. And then we're going to do our code. So again, I forgot the method, but it should be easy to find. It should be player movement dot jump maybe. Jump player, perfect. Love autocomplete. So this will run once, and it'll make the player jump. Again, you can try this if you want. You can take jump player out, and you can see that it'll run 3 times, but we only want to run it once. So now we can hook that method up to our input actions. Again, by going back to player, dragging the thing in, just like you would for a button or any other event. Very easy to connect. I am a fan of the new input system. Except when I'm debugging, because I got to go through this whole process. Okay, now if we try to run and we press our spacebar, we should see a nice, beautiful jump. Wow. Isn't input good? Okay, so that's everything that I have planned. Does anyone want me to go over anything specific? Yes. Perfect. Of course you can.
Oops.
And then if not, there's some other fun things that we can go over. Just for funsies so you can learn a little bit. I was going to bring my controller so we could plug it in and see how it works. How you can make controller inputs, because it's exactly the same as this. It's very easy, but I forgot.
Me too.
That's my bad.
Can you go over how you added the jump bind and the input action thingy?
Yeah. Like in the action map? Yeah. So under actions, I just clicked the plus button, and then I just named it jump. And then there's a drop down with a binding. Right now there's no binding, so I just added that.
Yeah, it's a little confusing because there's quite a few pluses on the side there, I'm realizing.
Right, yeah.
So I could see how that would be annoying. Yeah. Any other questions or curiosities before we go into some just fun things? Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
The most important things to remember when trying to make your own input script is the using input actions thing at the very top. Writer might like auto add it for you because it's nice and fancy like that. But as long as you remember the using Unity Engine .input system, the rest of it should be pretty straightforward because most things will autocomplete. But input action, if you remember that too, it'll be pretty easy to drag and drop to remember. Okay. So I think we're gonna go into some fun things. So we're just gonna go over how you could do a controller. I said it's exactly the same. And then we're also gonna talk about the bindings and the different interactions you can have. So if we go back into the player actions tab, we're going to go up to control schemes, and we're going to make a new control scheme for whatever device you would want to add. In this case, a controller, gamepad, controller. Names are fun like that. For the device types, we're going to go for gamepad. And then there's a whole bunch of specific ones. You can just press gamepad for the widest coverage of gamepads. And you'll switch it to that. And you'll notice that all of our bindings are gone now. And that's because we assigned them to the keyboard control scheme. So when we're in the controller control scheme, they will not appear. Just a nice way of separating stuff. But you can see we still have our main actions, our move and our jump. We just have to assign new bindings to them. So it's exactly the same process. You would click add. I think it's still an up-down composite. On the plus on the move column. So many different pluses, yeah. So we do that and make our vector. But this time, instead of binding it to our control stick or to our keyboard, we would bind it to a controller. Exactly the same process. You would also click add to keyboard control scheme. And if you have a controller plugged in, it will recognize those inputs, so you can use this. It's a bit tedious to go through and manually add. Yeah, that's how you would add a new control scheme if you want a different form of input. It's nice to have an easy way to add controllers. For all you capstone kids, making your game work with a controller is pretty sick. Okay, the last thing I want to go over before I stop talking is the bindings and interactions. So in our control map, or I keep forgetting, player actions, our control input, no, our input actions, gosh, so many names. We're going to, on the binding tab, my words are getting confused.
There we go.
Even with my code workshop. The asset, the player actions asset.
Oh, this one?
What's going on? Well, there it goes. Okay, so when you click one of your bindings, we'll go with S, or no, we'll go with A because we did a left-right thing. You can see over there we have processors, or is it processor? We'll see. We'll see if I'm wrong. Click the plus, and we should see. Okay, so processors is the other thing that I was going to talk about. These are ways of changing your data. So you can see it has all these different options for affecting how you want that value to be treated. It looks like you can make it bigger. You can invert it if you want, so you can make inverted controls. If you're using a controller, this is where you would add the dead zones. What I was looking for was actually on the main asset itself, the walk. The walk, I believe. Yes, the interactions. Interactions is what I was looking for. If we add those are how you would add your press and hold, or your tap, or your drag and drop, I think it can do. Oh, maybe not. But those words are kind of vague, so I wrote down what they do. Let's see. Did I write down what they do? I did. Here they are. Okay, so hold requires the player to hold for a certain amount of time. So if you add the hold, you'll see it has a time to hold, and you can change that. And the way you detect this is by using the started, performed, and canceled things I talked about before in the code. So the started will always run when it starts. The performed runs when this interaction finishes. So for a hold, it would run after the hold time has been completed. So if you wanted to make a press and hold a jump, you would add the hold thing, you would add the time you want to hold it for, and then in the code where we said context.started and then jumped, you would say context.performed and then jumped, because that would trigger after the hold. And then there's other ones there. There's a press That one is less used. It's a way of forcing the input to act like a button. So it'll only trigger once like a button would. You don't need to use that most of the time because there's a specific button. We used it for jump. It's a specific button callback. Tap. Let's see, what's that do? It requires a press and release within a certain amount of time. So it's different than the initial press that we have because it'll trigger, like if you tap and hold, it won't work. If you tap and release really quick, it would work, kind of thing. And then slow tap is the press and hold that I was talking about. I haven't used most of those. I've only ever used hold, kind of the best one. You can also add multiple of them, and I've seen somebody do it. You can add a double tap feature, and it'll recognize a double tap. I don't remember how to do that though, so ask Google. But other than that, that's all that we have prepared. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.